It's hardly a state secret at this point that the mainstream media are pretty much all in for gay marriage. You just look at the coverage and 90% of it is laudatory or celebratory, and some journalists have even been quoted as saying there are not two sides to this issue. Now, I understand why a lot of people are celebrating the Supreme Court ruling, something that would have seemed unthinkable even a decade ago. But what about the 40% of the country that, for whatever reason, personal, religious, does not support same-sex marriage, is in favor of traditional marriage? What does the media have to say to them? And here's my problem. My problem is, as a journalist, I am trained and I believe that we ought to tell all sides of every debate. Now, there are certain aspects of behavior, outright racism, for example, that we can all agree are completely and totally out of bounds. In the case of gay marriage, I'm not taking on the right of gays to marry. I am saying that until 10 or 15 years ago, this was the consensus view in the country, including among many Democrats. So imagine now that you are somebody, maybe a regular churchgoer, who does not believe in gay marriage. And imagine as well, maybe you live in the South, and maybe you don't have a problem with the Confederate flag. You understand that the Confederacy was fought on behalf of slavery, but you see the flag as something to honor Confederate soldiers who fought and died for your state. And you don't agree with the majority media consensus opinion that it stands for hate and racism. You see it as standing for tradition. And imagine further that you're also a person who has trouble accepting the whole transgender movement. Again, this is not my views. I'm trying to put myself in the situation of somebody who has these beliefs. And suddenly Diane Sawyer is sitting down with Bruce Jenner, who becomes Caitlyn Jenner, and most of the media coverage is very positive. And even Pope Francis, who's been a very popular and groundbreaking pope, coming down very firmly on the side of climate change, and maybe you don't like that either. So from your point of view, if you have those opinions, the world has suddenly been upended, and things that you thought were settled, in some cases for thousands of years, have suddenly changed. There's this great upheaval, and you look at the mainstream media and you don't see yourself reflected in that coverage. In fact, you see very few voices who speak to what you believe as far as these sensitive social topics. This is where I think the press is falling down, because many of us do live in a bubble, whether it's the New York, LA, Washington, elitist circles that many journalists travel in, or just by virtue of the fact that most of the people who we know say, of course, gays should have the right to marry, and of course the Confederate flag should not be flown at the South Carolina State Capitol or any place else. And it's important for us to recognize that there are other points of view, even if they're not folks in your social circles, and that we ought to treat those people with dignity and respect, and we ought to have some kind of balance in our coverage, which I just see lacking over the last week and the last few weeks when it comes to these issues. And this is why a lot of people hate the media. It's not that everyone out there is going to agree with everything that we journalists do in terms of reporting and commentary and analysis. It's that we seem to marginalize them in too many cases. And I think that is a real problem for the news business.